We are back! All right, y'all. Welcome to the Responsive Nonprofit Summit Backstage. I want to give you all a few minutes. What's on your mind? What's on your heart? What questions do you have? What topics were most interesting that you want us to dive in deeper? What myths do you want us to debunk? This is an open sandbox. I have the chat right here with me, so I can bubble up your questions in real time. So we're just gonna talk through our biggest wins, biggest highlights through the day, but mostly we want to be here for you. So whatever you want us to dive deep on, the experts await, I suppose,
I love it.
So while folks kind of drop some questions in the chat, I'm just curious to kind of bubble up and round robin. How are y'all feeling about the day? What were some key takeaways y'all had?
Dave said, Dave said that crisis is the mother of innovation. That was just such a great way of thinking about the other side of crisis. And, it's a spin-off of, what is it, mother of invention?
Yeah, necessity is the mother of invention.
Necessity and crisis, being the godparents of invention and innovation. I just think that was really interesting. So Dave's session was great. I was really glad that I caught it.
I'm sorry I missed it. I can't wait to watch the recordings, though. I mean, when they come out, I can't wait to catch up on it.
Beautiful. Hey, I just want to give a shout out, Tamara Fox, thank you so much. Tamara just said, this is the best in-person or virtual nonprofit conference summit I've ever attended. So much wisdom and real tips for taking the knowledge back to our workplace. This space doesn't exist without you. So thank you. I'm so glad that you were able to join us, and thank you so much for the feedback.
Okay, can I love on Tamara just for a little bit? Because Tamara has hung out on the conversation stage for the last 2 days. She has had some of the most mic drop questions, wouldn't you say, John?
Truly, such great questions.
That truly awakened activity, those hearts, those applause emojis. And I just want to thank you, Tamara, for being leaned in, for lifting your voice, because that is why we do this, is because nobody wants to go it alone. We all want to know what's on your hearts, because we want to be able to troubleshoot that and get you unstuck and get you in community. So thank you for living that, and thank you for that kind comment.
I love that.
And I mean, I talked about community yesterday, but I thought I always see it threaded in what we talk about, because we talked about impending systems, things that are going to take a lot of work, a lot of ideas, a lot of hearts pouring into it. And it honestly feels like it's not going to work unless we all pour into it also, and just something as simple as the disrupting the grant application process. So we had Yada Peng on the stage with innovation, and she's like, how has nobody thought of this to make the grant process so much easier? But I think to really change the sector, we're going to all have to show up and pour into this conversation and start talking about what are the problems. Why is this holding back funds from moving more quickly? And what populations are getting missed because it's so complicated and complex? And it's going to take a lot of voices to really get the attention. So I think if you're feeling like sitting back, like your voice doesn't matter, this is the opposite of that. Like your voice is crucial to making some of these bigger problems go away and finding the right solutions, along the way. So.
Can I drop it?
Ooh. I love it.
I think I want to riff just a little bit on that, because I think something that really stuck with me is how desperately people do want to evolve. And I love that is really the theme of this conversation and this entire summit is the need to want to evolve. And so thank you for how you're pouring in. And I think, Tyler, you're trying to get attention of Dave. So no, Tim, put the mic up. Y'all, this is real time right now. You're seeing it live and in action.
We're real human beings trying to do the best we can with what we've got.
How have you seen that play out, Eric? Have you seen that too?
100%. And going to your other point, it's if people want to actually evolve, they're making that first step by coming here. Right? And it's intentional that it's only 3 or 4 hours to be able to do this. And the fact that we're taking the time to learn from our thought leaders, our technologists, everyone else to be able to lean in on change, I think is incredible.
Okay, so we've got some questions starting to float in.
Love it.
Thank you so much. Anyone, if you have questions, float them into the chat. Nan, Director of Development for the the Wade Institute for Science Education in Quincy, Mass. Great to have you. My family is generational Bostonian, so it comes close to home. Nancy had asked, she's learning a lot and enjoying the summit, but her main takeaway so far is the frustration that comes within the higher levels and the executive levels within the organization that make it really impossible to use all the information and good advice. So I'm curious, like, what tips does this group have for stakeholdering up the learnings that you take to then implementing that change?
Kudos for stakeholdering. That's a cool new word that I want to like use in my language.
Gotta be its own thing. Yeah.
I'll jump in because one of these questions came up in one of our sessions, and I thought our panelists responded to it brilliantly, but really looking for the small wins. You know, if you want to change the entire organization, that's not the greatest playbook to go in and say, especially to a founder or to an executive director that's been in the role a long time, but to find something small that you could test. This is where we talked about innovation and talked about the idea of risk tolerance too. Like, take something that's not going to completely break anything, but could have a small, quick enough win, and then go in with that data point to just open the conversation. I thought that was transformational, even in our small team, to like change the things that seem like the things that nobody wants to talk about changing. You want to hop in there, Dave?
I am totally going to hop in here. So when you talk about small wins, I had a flashback to like 16 years ago when I was this new director of this digital team at the agency that I was at, and I remember it was a very traditional agency. It was very digital was a new thing, and one of the things that I just committed to do early on was every Friday at staff meeting, even if it's like 30 seconds and it's like, we sent an email, I would just share with the team like, hey, this thing came out, or we had this opportunity, whatever. I just had one little tidbit, and like years later people came back and they were like, oh, it's so weird how every staff meeting you had something to share, and it was just that small wins idea. And so I would encourage you, whatever access you have, whatever opportunity you have, to just like look for the small wins, but then just, as we keep saying here, socialize them. Just share, like, and you don't need to be grandiose about it or prideful about it, but if people don't know, they don't see those small wins, then they can miss that opportunity.
I think the other thing that I want to piggyback off of that is, I did this probably about 10 years ago at a nonprofit that I worked at, where I actually thought that they hired me for the wrong role. And I was like, oh my gosh, if I could just spend my time over here and develop something completely net new, what impact would that have with the organization? And I was terrified. I was young, I was early in my career, I was really scared to go to our executive director and say, I think I'm in the wrong seat. Right? And so it was like initiating that change came from, I actually took the initiative to rewrite my job description. But what I did was, talking about small wins, I connected the changes to how that would, from a KPI perspective and a metrics perspective, I said, this is actually how I think we can generate more revenue for our mission if we stop doing these three things and start doing these three things. And I think I can help. Right? And so, because I brought the clarity into keeping the mission at the center of change, the reception was so positive. I was in a new role within 3 weeks.
I'm so proud of you.
It was
Way
fun.
to go fight for your change. That's
so, advocate, be a voice, but like, I think connect the small wins to impact, connect the small wins to metrics. Here at Virtuous, like, we really have a principle that we believe that there is kindness within metrics, because metrics give clarity. And metrics are your pathway to impact.
Okay, I gotta fist bump, high five, you're here. I guess I can actually do it. I don't have to put an emoji on there, all of it. But I want to give Nam one more suggestion, because I think you might have pinged this also to Yada, who had a great suggestion. But I would say we have this question so often in the We Are for Good community, because I think just our community is forward-thinking individuals who want to work in a balanced and equitable sort of mission environment. And so one of the things I would advise to you is look for your allies. Who are your allies to change and to innovation? We had a great podcast episode with Mona Sinha. She's the board chairman of Women Moving Millions. You have to give $1 million before you can even get within this organization. And she says, I don't hold the power as the board chair. My ED holds the power. And I rely on her to educate me, to send me information about things that are trending. And I look to her for innovation. So if you can't get that from your executive director, look at where else your allies are. Are they in your staff? Are they your volunteers? Are they your board members? Do you have a donor who is really invested in forward-thinking change that you can get on board? We're not telling you to circumvent your boss at any point, but we're just saying have conversations about innovation, do your training, do your reading, share what you know, and elevate people as you go. And I think it'll be a much harder push, or a less harder push, if you're getting more people to kind of join you in lockstep.
I love that. There are some more questions coming through. This is one of our favorites. Kayla, thanks so much for dropping this. There are so many people who are hesitant to donate to organizations when 100% of their gift doesn't go to program funds, and when there's some kind of allocation to overhead, salaries, etc. How do you recommend encouraging donors to give with that barrier in mind? I might even, Kayla didn't say this, but I would go as far as to say, like, how do we overcome that stigma?
Okay, can I be dramatic and just
Go.
that question kills me.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry I'm talking so much, but we just talked about this yesterday. If you've not seen Dan Pallotta's TED Talk on the overhead myth, please check it out. It's like 18 minutes of pure gold. And there's actually a documentary coming out in September called Uncharitable. Please take your board members. Please take your staff. Please take your neighbors, family, and friends, because it is going to take a movement of people to understand that overhead is people. It is human capital, and we have to keep the lights on. We have to pay for our insurance. We have to pay for these things that are not sexy. I mean, I think about a conversation we had with Ana Maria Argalagos, who's the CEO of Hispanics in Philanthropy, and she said during COVID, they almost went under because everybody was making gifts, restricted gifts, saying, I want it to go to people on the front line, and then they got a Mackenzie Scott gift. $30 million dropped right into their lap, unrestricted, and she says that fueled our innovation. It fueled not only the sustainability, but it helped us run. And there was such trust-based leadership in that I just think we have to start talking about overhead is human beings. So getting off my soapbox.
Okay, I'll join your soapbox because we've talked about this on our podcast with Mallory Erickson. I know she was on one of our panels yesterday. If you're not familiar with her work, definitely pour in. But she said, something disruptive, and this piggybacks on the whole idea of community. We all need to pour into this conversation through your own unique lens, through your own unique story as an organization. But let's say your overhead's so high that it dings you on your charity navigator. Put that on the front page of your website and talk about why it's that way. They're looking at different factors that are contributing to that because of our staff. Just owning it and trying to own the narrative about it, we can slowly shift the mindsets. But I think this is a great, empowering one-on-one conversation to Becky's point that our human capital is our most important asset. So how are we nurturing that? How are we prioritizing that for the sustainability of our mission? I'm getting amped up. Put me in there, coach.
If we truly believe also that is a myth, and we're empathetic towards donors, and we're thinking of them as partners, then the empathetic approach to that is to say, hey, this actually doesn't fit with your values of wanting to help our organization move forward. And so I want to help you understand what you might not know you mean when you say these words, and helping reshape their expectations around that. I've seen that happen multiple times, especially, there's really crazy words around this in the Web3 area with crypto people who believe a lot of things about nonprofits that are really interesting. And I found that they're really open to the conversation if you just have it. And a lot of people aren't willing to have the conversation. They're afraid of offending, or they're afraid of not getting the donation. And I think the real value there is the partnership. So go after the partnership and say, hey, I really care about what you're thinking here, and I don't think it reflects your values.
Well, and I go the other route. I might be the uncommon person here, but I'm the frontline fundraiser background, and I like what you're saying, Tim, because I would lean in on that. I would say have these conversations, what you guys are talking about, of just how overhead is important to us. But at the end of the day, if the overhead is important to the donor, why are we asking the donor to give to us at that level? Right? But I don't want to get too far down with too many restrictive gifts, because then it's unmanageable for our nonprofit. But we can be able to fund staff training, staff retention, staff position, create an endowment. I come from a higher ed university I have a healthcare background, so create those endowments to self-fund what we need to do and do everything else to focus on impact.
Yeah, I want to try to tie a couple threads here together, because something that's interesting is in the Uncharitable documentary that's coming out, one of the focuses of the film is a campaign called Coney 2012 that I had the privilege and honor of being a part of. And what's really interesting is one of the big learnings I had from that campaign is, like, I love this thought of transparency. Be really open and transparent with your donors and partners on how you're spending your money. But I think the reminder is we have to zoom out, because we can't let the critic get us down. And if someone is stuck on the stigma of overhead, like, we have to push through that and we have to push past that. We received a lot of criticism for our campaign. We created a film that went viral. For people that don't know, it generated 100 million views in 5 days that raised unprecedented awareness about our mission. And we raised 5 times as much money in 5 days than we usually generate in a year. Now, about, once the story hit big headlines, everyone started looking at our financials and they said, oh, this nonprofit's trying to end a war in Central Africa, but they spent $250,000 on a movie. What a waste of money. But if we hadn't made that movie, we wouldn't have raised $30 million in 5 days. And at the end of the day, while our critics were louder, guess what? Our recurring donor base grew from 6,000 to nearly 75,000 in a week.
Thanks for the press, critics. Really appreciate it.
Right?
Bring
So
awareness.
so while the critics might get you down about your overhead, at the end of the day, like, I'm so grateful because we have more partners and more donors now because of it. So I think it's just be clear about your mission, be clear about it with your donors, and cut through the noise.
And find the right language. Like, I think this is what we find a lot with people is I don't know how to respond to that. When I have a board member that comes to me, and I would just say, like, flip that script and say, oh my gosh, thank you so much for asking me about overhead. This is something that I'm really passionate about, because overhead is actually human capital. And I mean, this example with Mallory is fantastic. She says she has clients and nonprofits that say, we are proudly a bronze level charity navigator, nonprofit. And what that means is that we invest in our people, and that we invest more in our people. And P.S., that documentary, marketing is mission. We have talked about it at least 3 different times. It is no longer, just a line item. It is your mission manifested, and we've got to be pouring into that. It's going to create awareness, and it's going to create viral community.
Yeah, and I think just, again, to double down, like, I feel like maybe I could step off the soapbox, but no. There is so much to be said about how investment in education and awareness fuels funding later down the line. And it's critical. And if we're over-indexed on funding and fighting the stigma, but we have a lack of awareness or education or understanding about our work, that's an uphill battle that's going to be really hard to win.
Yeah.
Woo!
Get me all hot and bothered. that one
cold water.
Because we're like pigs on a blanket right here on the couch.
This was good. Thank you so much for raising this point. I love where this conversation went. I'm gonna bubble out again. I'm gonna ask you a question because I want to give folks time. What's on your heart? What's on your mind? What's challenging you at your organization today that we can talk about? But so drop your questions in the chat. But Eric, I'm really interested in the day that you had today and yesterday, because you have spent a lot of time in the last couple of days in one-on-one conversations with the leaders on the front lines of fundraising, right? Like, you have been speaking directly within your panel conversations about the people that are pushing the boulders up the mountain. And I just, I didn't get the chance to listen to your sessions. So I'd just love to know, what are 3 things that you pulled out of those conversations that any fundraiser could take away and learn from?
It was interesting. I was in the last session with the healthcare leaders, and the conversation was talking about when we did I always ask at the end, what's one nugget that we can take away, right? We're not going to be able to create a Grateful Family program in 45 minutes. We're not going to be able to, figure out how to be on the front lines as these fundraisers in that 45 minutes. But what can be one thing? And the thing that stood out to me was the idea of failing forward, and the idea of just testing, getting out of our box, and willing to take chances and willing to take risks, because to do the video, to do everything that we've done in our careers, we've willing to move forward. And I've heard that over and over today as a constant theme of just failing forward.
I mean, we were talking about failure all over our stage as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We lean into a discussion about innovation, and there's really just this juxtaposition. I know we could all riff on the difference between business and for-profit and nonprofit, and it's not fully translatable, but I think the mindset in the for-profit world is, investors are investing expecting you to fail because they want you to fail as quickly as possible so you can get to the right next solution.
Yep.
And there's just like an absence of that mindset in nonprofit. So you start to think of like, if we started to embrace this as a community, if we're all leaning into this, we're all having these kind of conversations, what could happen collectively? How much faster could we move together if we embrace that failure is really normal? And it may just start off with just if you're a leader, being really socializing what you're failing at and making it really normal to talk about that, to embrace it, to either laugh about it or what can we learn from this. Becky's mantra at the dinner table is you don't lose, you learn, which I think is so powerful, even in a family unit, of just normalizing this is part of life. And the faster we move through that, the more we get to the better stuff at the end.
Well, there's a conversation yesterday that we had with one of our speakers, Andrew Olson, loves talking about this, is the fact that nonprofits are managed on an annual basis. Their budgets are year over year. So they have no ability to fail because they're focused on a 12-month retention plan or a fundraiser or a giving plan. But let's look at the lifetime value of donors. Let's look at 36 months, the rolling average, like all those different things to be able to allow us to embrace change and be able to do all the things that you're referencing.
I feel like, Dave, you got to have a really interesting point of view on failing forward. I'm curious, like,
failure? What? I don't know.
I know none of it.
You actually, Eric, funny enough, you used the goldfish metaphor yesterday in I think it was in our panel. Is it Ted Lasso?
Ted Lasso.
The memory. And I was like, yeah, I actually have a really terrible memory. So, like, I've used that to my advantage personally, candidly. Like, as far as just you got to move on. Just thinking about some of the stuff that I shared in terms of the mistakes of innovation. I didn't talk about failure, but one of the things I did talk about was being willing to learn from other settings, and I'm the kind of guy, I don't know about you, but some people are like, I have to make my own mistakes. I'm like, no. I'd actually rather just learn everybody else's mistakes and then just avoid those. And then that'll like narrow down the field. So now there's only 1,000 mistakes I can make rather than, 1,000,000.
Right.
And so I am a huge believer in what we can learn from other leaders, absolutely in a setting like this, but also outside of ourselves. So outside of our industry, so to speak. So what can we learn from, companies like Disney? And it's like, in some sense, it's just like a wildly different environment. But I think there are things that we can learn. Disney, I would say right now, is not really on a hot streak of great, films and great PR. Right? There's some difficult.
Mermaid's coming out this weekend. I'm really rooting for it. It was Guardians of the Galaxy 3. Yes.
Marvel's coming back, but I think there are some things that we can learn, and even just actually specifically with Disney, I highly recommend a book that Bob Iger recently came out with his biography. Now, it's a biography, so it's a little edited, so to speak. But he does talk about how Disney had lost its way creatively, and what does it look like to make massive changes, and in essence, essentially through in that case acquiring this little company called Pixar, like changing the entire heritage. Like, can you imagine like outsourcing creative when you're Disney? Like, that just is like anathema. Like, you're going to kill the culture here. But that was the kind of injection that they needed at that time to create the kind of opportunities. So talk about failure.
I had this conversation earlier this week, like looking at Pixar, looking at other for-profit companies, is like I was at Truth Bomb. Eric is always on the road representing Virtuous at conferences. I had the opportunity to go to a conference this past week, and the keynote speaker there was the executive producer to Pixar. She was in charge of the movie Inside Out, and she just did the storytelling arc on how to tell a story and do it for fundraisers and do it for organizations, like the ups and the downs and everything else. So those are little things that we can learn from thought leaders in for-profit. Don't look at Disney as a whole, but what's that small bite?
Well, and by the way, I don't know about you guys, but I am a geek for the behind-the-scenes stories, and they often don't come out for like 5 or 10 years. But go back and watch some of the behind-the-scenes stories of these movies. They were like train wrecks behind the scene most of the time. Like Toy Story got to the point of being basically released, and the other studio that was involved with Disney at the time had basically completely gutted the heart of the movie. And John Lasseter and the team were like, I think we need to start over, and they're 3 years into production and hundreds of millions of dollars or whatever. And so a lot of the best, and this is one of the things that I talked about that Tim referred to, this crisis-tunity, like crisis represents opportunity. And you go behind any of these Oscar-winning movies or any of these, award-winning products or these organizations, nonprofits that are doing impactful work, and often behind the scenes, it's not pretty. Like the sausage making is not pretty, and we want to believe. I think it's a Hollywood thing. We want to believe that it was super smooth and they knew what they were doing from the beginning, and it's like they had no clue, and they were 80% of the way into this process, still figuring this out. So I think if Disney can spend a couple $100 million and get it wrong 80% of the time, and then kind of figure it out by the end, like I think we have some hope.
I love the movie reference. I'm a movie buff, so I'm just like, flash forward to the behind the scenes on Jaws where Steven Spielberg's on a megaphone going, "The shark is broken. The shark is not working." Like, thank God the shark was broken. Brilliant. We had another question come through Q&A. This one's really interesting, and I'm curious. Let's just start with you, Tim, and we'll go around. This was asked on a webinar recently. They're curious if we could answer, if our nonprofit can only fund one thing right now, what would you recommend investing in?
And I get to answer this first?
You're welcome. Maybe we could all take a minute to think about.
Right. I feel like I have to say technology, but I don't think that's the right answer. I'm going to say technology for now. I'm going to let these guys.
we'll boomerang back.
That was a big failure, and this is what I should have said anyway. So I'll come back to it later. But I do think I will say that I'll just speak to the technology side of this, and something that I introduced and is a new idea to me about digital transformation is that one of the most powerful tools for digital transformation is food. It literally powers the human stack.
Yeah.
And if you introduce food to an idea, you're going to be gathering people and you're going to be talking with each other. And that is almost always one of the most important things you can do in digital transformation. So I will say this, if you can only invest in one thing, I'd make some of it be food. So I'm eliminating the entire question there.
I love it.
So I'm going to go there.
I think I can help with this one.
All right.
Okay, I come from the Boy Scouts as well. And the Boy Scouts, we have a lot of silos. We have marketing, we have campaign, we're camping, we have fundraising, we have
camping.
We have all these different camping.
Literally a silo.
Campaigning, great.
I have too much coffee.
That's awesome.
And I was always asked by our leaders, senior leaders in all those different departments, they were trying to figure out, okay, what my project is more important. That needs funded today. The program, the camping, the physical, the endowment, all those different things. I twisted the answer and actually went back to my board and said, what is the strategic priority? Our board of directors are in charge of our nonprofit organizations. They're the ones who prioritize that list, go right down, because boots on the ground fundraisers, we need to be filling that bucket, whatever it is that the board decides to do, right? And so that's probably the easiest route to do. And if they want monthly giving, they want annual giving, they want program, they want camping, whatever it might be for our mission, they're the strategic leaders driving the boat forward. We're just the two engines on the back pushing it.
Beautiful.
So I write a weekly report on innovation and trends and lessons that leaders can learn. So I literally this morning wrote this week's report, and I think it can be a helpful thing to consider when you ask, what's the one thing we should invest in? What does that look like? And it's the idea of looking for the bright spots. And I think we may have talked about this a little bit in our panel, Eric, but in any time of difficulty, any time of change, there's always bright spots. And so one, that's just a good way to bolster your spirits when things are difficult. But two, when you ask about what to invest in, you've got to look at the landscape of what's happened. I would say look at the last year and ask yourselves the question, what is something that was unexpectedly successful this last year? It doesn't have to be a big thing. I think we tend to think of it needs to be life-changing in scale and all those sorts of things, but what is just one bright spot? Because often last year's unexpected success is next year's opportunity. And so that is, in other words, an it depends answer. But I think for a lot of folks, it can be I heard this session on this, and then I should totally do a foundations program. And those donor advice funds are super important. And Dave keeps talking about the subscription economy, so I should probably do something with monthly giving. But the reality is,
squirrel. Yeah, squirrel.
Absolutely. And
that's too much of being a goldfish.
Too much goldfish. So the reality is, it's like a friend of mine, and I love how he said this. This is a 30-year fundraising veteran, has raised millions and millions of dollars, and he's like, Dave, basically my entire career has been, I find out what works, and I do more of that. And I was like, really? His name's Rory. Shout out to Rory. And it was like, that's it? And it's like, yeah, like you find out what works and you do more of that. And I don't mean to sound overly simplistic, but I think we can make it too complicated.
Yeah.
We're like, yeah, that's working pretty well. I'm going to go deal with this fire over here. It's like, but that's working pretty well. What if you like quadrupled that or 10x'd that thing? And I think too often we get caught in firefighting and sort of trying to have a balanced portfolio. And sometimes a little imbalance can be a good thing if you're focused on the right
focus in on that
opportunity.
attention. You get that 10x, and it overfills that bucket. Then you can focus on the next thing and the next thing and the next thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we have a meta question within the question, which I
Okay.
think will be an interesting
Facebook.
rabbit
This is a
hole.
different
Yeah,
meta.
different meta. So talking about what's one thing that we should focus on right now. We have a team that's small. They wear a lot of hats. Their fundraising tends to, the text is small, fall to the wayside. With our limited capacity, we're evaluating what's the most effective use of our time. And they're asking through the lens of, do we focus on one-time major gifts, monthly gifts, both? Like, where do we steer our energies from a fundraising channel perspective?
I've done a little bit of fundraising, and I'm so sorry for the it depends answer, but I will unpack both.
Seriously?
Yep.
If you are early, this is an example. So I'm working with an organization right now. They're early stage, and they don't have any sort of scale. I have a very, very small donor file, and I'm a huge proponent of what's happening with monthly giving and subscription philanthropy. But my advice to that particular organization, because of the relationships they have and where they're at in their stage of development, is absolutely invest in major donors. Some organizations, it may be foundations and grants because of the type of program that you have. So I think it definitely depends on your stage. I would say, though, for especially early and mid-stage organizations, investing in monthly giving is massively important because it takes a little bit longer to build that ramp, but that ramp just stays. Like I was just looking at, I don't know if you guys were looking at the fundraising effectiveness project, results, and the overall every number at the top of that report was down, and down. And it's like, oh, this is great. But if you actually looked under the surface at what's happening with retention was down for every category, including, by the way, what they called regular givers, which are like 7+ gifts. So those are kind of your sustainers, if you will. However, retention was down by more than double for 1, 2, and 3 time givers than they were for regular givers. And the retention for regular givers was down to 89.6%. Wow. So I'm like, if I could keep 89.6% of my donors, I would like to do more of that, please. Yes. Right? So I think monthly giving is massively important, but you have to, just to use a business term, it's like a cash flow problem. You have to be able to afford to build a monthly giving program. And a lot of times major gifts can be a huge boost in that early stage.
Okay, I guess I'm going to agree and I'm going to dissent at the same time because I agree that it does depend, because I do think your data tells the story.
Yes.
And I think if you can get into your data and you can find behavioral and engagement signals that are trending in certain ways. And if you're looking for somebody to hire, I always want to throw out a resource. Like Clay Buck is the king of going into your data and finding trends. We're looking at things that are doublers. Who are your donors who are doubling their gift, maybe, and I don't mean year after year, but I mean maybe even in the same year, $50 to $100, $100 to $200, or velocity givers, somebody who gave $100 gift and then all of a sudden they come out with $1,000 gift. Those are engagement signals that there's a population or an individual that needs to be seen in a different way. And John and I are just grassroots people. We're here for the everyday donor, and I value what Dave said, because I am also a recovering major gift officer. But I do think that this is such a moment that we are sitting in to awaken and really codify what Gen Z and honestly millennials are already starting. They want personalization. Yep. They want to see their story. They want to see their value. And if you can really do what's our core value number 2 of our company, which is play the long game. If you can really build an intentional culture of seeing these individuals, I think monthly giving is absolutely brilliant and such a great sweet spot for your Gen Z. Just getting someone in the door with a recurring gift. I mean, they're used to buying Netflix, on recurring. I'm in New York City visiting Julie the other day, and there are monthly programs for getting your nails done. How many times you can go to the salon. I mean, the world is adapting in this way, and I think for our missions to meet it, we've got to adapt as well. So look at your data, start there, and then just start telling your story over and over. It will build a grassroots movement, and the power goes to the people.
But I agree 100% with that, but I go another step further where it's, don't turn your monthly giving program into a bill pay, right? It's not my DirecTV bill. It's not my Will Water bill. And what I heard today in a couple of the sessions was the personalization of automation, right? Like, so because of you was the phrase I heard a lot, right? And there's a thank you as a stewardship, as a monthly giving. Because of you, Nurse Sue was able to support my mom when she was in hospice care. Right? Like, so be able to have that personalization as a fundraiser, as a nonprofit, as large as you want. If you want to be a healthcare system with thousands upon thousands of records versus a small 50-person nonprofit donor base, have that personal connection.
Yeah, and Kayla just gave some more context. She said, to give more clarity, we're a mid-sized org with a small pool of major donors and about 200 monthly givers, which is great.
That's a great start.
And I think, not to make the answer more convoluted, but I think the reason why we've gathered here is that, like, the world that our donors live in is a hyper-personalized world. So I don't think that there's a silver bullet channel that we're going to automatically win in. We actually have to meet our donors in the ways that they want to give to us and show up to us. And I think there are some simple ways that we can start, right? It's like, it's as simple as, and there are things that actually can run in the background that don't take a lot of human lift or take more time or resource from your team. So I think oftentimes when we say start simple at Virtuous, we say, hey, every time a new donor makes a first-time gift, what's your new donor welcome series?
Yeah.
What are the first 5 emails they get? What are the first touch points you're going to give them? And set that up to automate in the background. Use whatever email provider or platform you're using to set up those automated touch points to educate, raise awareness, bring them in closer. There was something else I was going to say, and I totally.
How do you eat an elephant? The easiest question, right? How would you eat an elephant? It's one bite at a time. You got
We
to
don't endorse eating elephants.
We don't eat
As a
elephants.
vegetarian, I really feel that. So, we had a panel today about sustaining and scaling your mission, and I would lift that replay because it doesn't sound like this is like a brand new organization, but we talked about even the danger of a founder stepping in and self-funding. And I think that's our natural go-to, like whatever it's going to be to make it work. But there's almost a danger when you're not in a posture to just invite people into the story. And so I think that's kind of a framework to say, hey, this is a place that not only we want your investment, we want you to be part of this movement. And so I think that kind of posturing is really critical. And where if you choose to go the major gift, you need to do it both. But we're of the grassroots nature, but I understand cash flow is a real deal. So finding the partners you can lock arms with, I think partnership is key, especially and kind of underserved in our sector. So we talked a lot about that today if you want to pour into those combos.
Brilliant. Awesome. We're getting to the top of the hour. There's one more question that I want to bubble up, and this is just whatever comes to top of mind. Someone had asked, if you're looking to elevate the expertise and education and fundraising for your team, what books, courses, resources do you all recommend that someone could equip for their team?
There's a lot of resources. Get going. My go-to always, as a former major gift officer, was Jerry Panis' book on asking. I read that before every major donor visit to be able to get out there. I'm a big believer in AFP, member of my local chapter in Western Pennsylvania, a couple global boards, everything else. I'm a member of AHP. Just get out there. Just get out there, learn. But at the end of the day, I think we learn more by doing. So being a practitioner, learn. If special events is your thing, go in deep. If you're a major gift, go in deep. If you're direct response, go in deep. Just be a practitioner, fail forward, and your community's around you.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know if this is self-aggrandizing, but I'm still going to do it. Listen to podcast. I mean, please come into the We Are For Good podcast. We have an entire series on how to start, and it's habits of these impactful fundraisers. We do it through, I think we had like a 12-part series. It was so freaking long.
was it
It was
called?
back to basics, and it was about annual giving. It's about donor relations, but it's also through the lens of how do we modernize annual giving? How do we modernize major gifts? How do we modernize storytelling arc? And so I would also say just like a couple books that I really love. Collecting Courage is an incredible book about how our black leaders and nonprofit staff members have to navigate this world and how we can be allies to them. I think Impact, written by Tammy Tibbetts and Kristen Brandt, who are founders of She's the First, are great about how to start and build a movement. And I would just say, look at what other people are doing. But don't get so siloed into thinking I have to do it that exact way, because your mission is unique. And I'm sorry, I have the mic. So can I go back to the one thing that somebody said we can invest in? Because I have a one thing I want you to invest in that's really unorthodox. And it is, I want you to invest in either a break, a sabbatical, or mental health for your staff right now. Because I feel like we all are understanding and we're all feeling that we are not well with our wellness, with our self-care. And there's a great case study from New Profit, you can Google it, where they took an entire week sabbatical for the entire team. They did all of this due diligence, and guess what they found? Like, there was no hiccup in the operations while they were gone, and it actually increased productivity when they came back because people were rejuvenated. And if we can even bake this in as a cultural element of normalizing rest and making people feel psychological safety to say, I think I need a break, then when they come back, they're ready to pour back into that mission at double time. And we want healthy individuals. So
Becky, that's so true. My wife just did that. My wife's an interior designer. She has 6 employees. She put an out-of-office message on the entire business for 2 weeks. Everybody just restructured the business, focused on themselves, didn't talk to any clients, didn't do any design work, and they're spot on, right, moving forward.
More of it.
So the beginning of, was it this year that we talked to Scott Harrison, the founder of Charity Water, on the podcast? Maybe we can link that up in this chat. But I thought it was really interesting because Charity Water gets brought up as the example like all the time, right? Oh, just do it like Charity Water. They've got the $60 million recurring giving program on their hands with the spring. And right out of the gate, Scott, we're asking about what trends he sees in the nonprofit sector. And it was something to this, I'll paraphrase. It was like, I really hate to disappoint you all, but I spend 0% of my time paying attention to the trends in the nonprofit sector.
0%.
Wow.
It's like he surrounds himself, he builds this personal board of directors of people that are finding connection, engagement in whatever vertical that they're in. He's figuring his friends are people that run Spotify, not the people, maybe that are not using progressive methods. And so I think doing that on our own scale, whatever you're at, it's about getting the different voices, having a growth mindset, and looking through an innovative lens. So while there's a lot of resources to plug in, obviously We Are For Good, that's part of our bent is professional development, but it's all about a growth mindset of listening from a diverse amount of voices that are not doing the things that you're doing. So you can come out with a fresh lens is probably the most disruptive and helpful thing that you can do in your own life and for your organization too.
Preach it, partner.
Preach it.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said. Well, y'all, I think we're going to wrap there. I'm going to plug one more resource. We actually, this morning during our opening keynote, we launched the Responsive Fundraising Maturity Model. And so it's a guide and a resource that can help show you on this path to hyper-personalization with your donors. Where do you stand? And actually coming out of the summit, what you experienced here, we're actually going to be launching a monthly meetup. So when you download the model, there's a checkbox and you can just say, sign me up for the monthly meetup. So if you're digging the energy here, if you're digging the conversations and the insights, we're doing this every month moving forward. So here's the resource here. We hope that it's helpful. Again, it's free and accessible. And that's a wrap for today. So we are going to be back tomorrow for day 3, the final day of the Responsive Nonprofit Summit. We are so grateful for all of you, your heart, your passion, the work you do, and the fact that you gave your precious time with us. We're honored, we're grateful, and we'll see you first thing tomorrow. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll catch you then.
Bye, friends.